later on today's episode of On the Other Hand.
The Christian people who are Christian nationalists, and even the pastors of that, are a small, infinitesimal group. It has become political. And so it's an attack line from part of this country that they're trying to label us all that way.
This is On the Other Hand. A podcast that features community leaders in Arkansas and elsewhere sharing their views and experiences on how to make our relationships and communities better. In the first part of our conversation with Jim Lagrone, he shared some interesting ideas about how he perceives faith engagement to be very important for Christians and for pastors, especially as they are working with government officials. And the surprising thing for me was that he was really focused on not the lobbying portion that sometimes is considered to be part of what faith and politics gets criticized about, but really on searching out ways to minister to those government officials.
Yeah, I think at one point he even said it almost sounds like he would be serving in the role of their pastor, although not formally so. One of the things that he said that I thought really hit the nail on the head is when we were talking about leadership, and it was specifically referring to leaders in the faith community, but he expanded it and basically said something along the lines of great leaders serve other people. And I think that emphasis on serving is really important.
Well, now let's get to the second part of our conversation with Jim Lagrone. So how do you navigate the balance with your connection with family council in a way that helps build trust with people across the political spectrum?
Which obviously that's the greatest challenge we have. So trying to keep that separate. And so far we've been able to do that. And so all I can say, I've got to talk, I've got to look people in the eye, and they've got to believe me. And they'll give me one shot at this. I trust you because of what you say, but boy, if I ever come out and start lobbying or something like that, then it's over. It's over. Can I tell you another lesson that I learned that I really want your listeners to hear? And this guy's a Baptist. We work with everybody, but he's a Baptist. He's from a town. I don't want to embarrass him or tell you the town. I heard about him. Let me tell you what this pastor did. He is loving on his town. He's doing a great job and all that. But there was a neighborhood in his town, and this is not a big city. There was a neighborhood in this town that the drug industry and the druggies and all of the things that go with that, and the crime and all that, they took over a neighborhood, and it just bothered him. So he decided the solution was he moved into the neighborhood. He bought a house, took his family, took his young children, did everybody to go into that neighborhood to see what he could do to kind of foster a different atmosphere. It took several years, but now the neighborhood has totally done a 180. In my mind, to use the language I would use, he saved a neighborhood because the crime is gone, the drugs are gone like they were. Now, this is a pastor, and this is what churches do. And those are the stories we need to hear about, not those other stories that are on extreme right or left. This is a guy that just loved on his town and did what he felt. And I had never thought about this before, and what courage that he had, and something I probably would never have done with my children. But yet he did. And now I get to tell his story, and we're working with him. We're trying to come up with a model that we can use for other churches. I can go to the pastor and say, look, this is what this guy did.
You know, it's interesting because it sounds very much like the power of relationships, what that pastor did in his town.
It is.
And we talk about that in Braver Angels all the time, the power of building relationships, solving a lot of problems of division. It's in a similar way, it kind of reminds me of the idea of community policing, where you get law enforcement to, be assigned to certain neighborhoods and build relationships, and that helps increase trust between the neighborhood and the law enforcement people, and then they kind of rally around, basically being for the laws and trying to have order in that neighborhood. So that's a neat idea. So this question: why is it important, do you think, to build relationships between faith leaders and government leaders?
Well, they're both leaders to start with in your question. They're both identified as leaders. They impact other people. And now we're unashamedly Christian. And so we want them to hear that voice. We want them to understand where we're coming from. And they need to have that kind of relationship. And plus, we don't need them to see the politician as an enemy, even if they vote differently. And they don't need to see the church as an enemy, even if they might not support them on certain laws and certain laws that they do. And so we've got to drop this. The situation that we've had as a country after Charlie Kirk's assassination has really, hopefully, brought this problem to light. We need to do more than just say dial it down. We need to dial it down. And I told my church the Sunday after the assassination, and I gave them two sermons that day. They felt so blessed, I'm sure. But the first one I have just on Charlie Kirk, but the bottom line of it is we want to be better people, but it starts with us. You can't say Washington, all that. We're going to make this neighborhood the best neighborhood, this community that we can have. And that's where we're going to start. You're going to listen to your neighbors, and you need to love on them and be nice to them. Be nice to the clerk in the store. Retail people will tell you it's hard serving the public in any capacity these days. And so, but we're the solution. You're the solution. I'm the solution in how we treat each other. It's got to start with us.
Absolutely. You've talked a little bit already about how you work with people in your group, in your network, and how you get them ready to work with government leaders. I wonder if you might be able to share a story about a positive or meaningful outcome from the work some of your folks have done.
Well, I do know that there's been some communications that's happened after our meeting. And some guys talk that they're beginning to talk and they're beginning to meet with them. So the project like we're working on down in Hope, I worked with DHS, the previous director. I've not met the new one yet, and I will. And so we were doing some work, and we are trying to target some counties. So I'm uncomfortable sharing those counties until we get things done. But we're going to go in there. We want to take one as an example. Just pull any county in Arkansas, and where you need to go is where the greatest need is. And so that's probably going to take us to the eastern or southeastern part of the state. And we're going to take a county and we're going to go through every social need that they have. And by that, the human trafficking, the foster, the child care, the addiction. And there's so many churches that are doing incredible work with recovery and things like that from addiction. We're going to go in and see what those issues are, identify 2 or 3 of them, and then develop a pilot program for churches to do in those areas. And that we can say, this works, this is bipartisan, this is not tethered to one denomination or one church or anything like that. Churches sometimes get competitive helping people. It's crazy. But, we really can do a lot more together than we can apart. So that's where we're at. We're still in the infancy stage to say that. I can tell you a story from another church ambassador from another state, if that's okay.
Yeah, please do.
This happened in Arizona. Arizona had just a few years ago, when immigration was really out of control, we all know that, they had a tent city there that was 2 blocks downtown. It was just incredible. It was a mess, crime, everything that goes with that. They approached the church ambassador group in Arizona and said, what could you do to help us in this area? So Arizona Arizona church ambassador brought in resources. They brought everything from showers to food and education and ESL classes. They were doing everything that they could. And when I arrived, just to get boots on the ground to see their process, that 2-block thing that they had was down to just maybe a third of 1 block that they still had tents there and people that they were working with. So that was the government asking a faith organization to see what you could do here. Our state government, a lot of people are not aware, but the legislature gives money out to support pregnancy centers. And for a long time, religious people could not accept money because with that money came a hand of government saying you can do this or that or all that. So now Arkansas is allowing Christian places to be Christian. It's okay. My church did a free dental and free health clinic this summer. Free, totally 100% free, not charging insurance, nothing. It was free, total. It was a great thing to do, but we did ask people when they came in if we could pray with them, if they had anything they wanted us to pray about. Most people said no, and that we leave it at that. But the ones that said yes, we got to love on some folks, pray with them for some needs in their life. You could not do that before, but now we're able to be Christian and love on folks in that way, and that's good. It's a good thing.
Yeah, it's good work working with people like that and helping out. I mean, that's part of what most major religions do is talk about
Sure.
helping the underserved and the vulnerable. And I would assume your understanding is that same thing would be true if it was not a Christian religion, like if it was Jewish
Sure.
or Muslim and all that.
Yeah, I'm one of the few. I might be the only preacher in the state. I don't know this, but I spoke over at the Muslim community place, which is not from ULR, far from ULR's campus. They told us there was 600 to 700 people there that night. It was exciting experience, to tell you. But I had a great time. I had a great time talking at dinner. We talked Israel and all that kind of stuff during the dinner. And then we just talked politics on that event. It was just politics. Now, I had somebody with me, and they asked him back. They didn't ask me back. So I don't know if I did a good job or not. But see, that was great. I go anywhere I get asked if my schedule allows it. And so we need to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. And getting people together who have different views and ideas is just so important if we're going to maintain our democratic form of government and kind of a civil society as well.
Absolutely.
So I was thinking about, what all we would ask you, and I'm thinking about, the Christian faith is centered around Jesus, obviously, his teachings, the model he provides. And Jesus, as you know, he often found himself in tension with the religious and the governmental authority of the day back then. And I was wondering what lessons, if any, you might see from that might apply to how our situation is today, how faith, people, and government apply here. How they
pay your
interact.
taxes, pay your taxes, render unto Caesar what's Caesar. We're told the New Testament teaches it well. What do they tell us to do for our leaders? We're to pray for them. We're to pray for them that we might live a peaceful life. It's an interesting concept there. I don't see anything in the words of Jesus or teaching in the New Testament that tells Christian people to remove themselves from society and to remove themselves from taking part. And our government system encourages people to take part and we're supposed to be able to have a seat at the table. And Jesus ate with sinners. So that means we can eat with politicians, right? Now, that was a joke for anybody that's listening. So.
That is, as a politician, they would probably find that as a joke as well. We hope anyway. Well, as some of the things that you've said, I think that some of our listeners who might not see the value as much in faith and politics kind of going together might say, hey, are we blurring somehow the separation of church and state and those strong ties? How do you respond to concerns related to that?
Well, when I'm trying to be funny, I would tell them, well, just take a pill and go home. Don't worry about it. So I think the great example comes from the DHS director that I mentioned, that she was reaching out to us. Why? Because churches do a lot of the same things. DHS is trying to take care of families. We want to help families out. We want the family structure to be strong. And so a lot of churches will do parent classes amazing that we have to do that kind of stuff. And but think of that medical care, taking care of that mother. A young mother that does not want to have abortion, but yet she has no income. Our situation is critical. She needs somebody to care for her and give them medical help and all that. We're doing some of the same things, so it only makes sense that we work together when we can. Now we can't work together all the time, and that's fine. But where we can make a difference together. And that's just, to me, the beauty of democracy. We're supposed to do that. We're supposed to do that. Even if I disagree on how they voted, we have a common interest in this area. Let's work together on it and solve it. Who cares who gets credit? You can get a lot more things done if you don't worry about who gets credit.
When it comes down to an more extreme version of the Christian connection in with faith, with government, which some people would call Christian nationalism. And I know that there's all kinds of definitions of that out there, and not everybody agrees on what that is. And people are labeled as Christian nationalists when they might not actually be. But there's a lot of conversation about that and how almost the Christian right has taken over the conservatives, and that kind of work. And I'm wondering, I'd just like to hear your thoughts a little bit about what you see as some of the challenges and opportunities around the conversation about Christian nationalism and its place in public life.
I love to talk about this subject, so I'm probably going to have a different answer than you anticipate. But you guys are smart, and your listeners are smart, so I want them to hear me. Okay, I have to set up my answer. I've done faith engagement with 3 different organizations across the country. And one of the amazing things, in every stripe of churches that are Baptist, churches that are Baptist but don't want to tell anybody, very liberal churches we would define, very right wing, all that kind of stuff. The Christian people who are Christian nationalists, and even the pastors of that, are a small infinitesimal group. The reason that you're talking about them, and the reason they're talked about, is that it has become political. And so it's an attack line from part of this country that they're trying to label us all that way. And we're not that way. I have not met in my life, in my nearly 50 years, I maybe have one pastor that comes to mind that I would say, boy, you're wrong. I would never tell it to him face, because then I'm labeled and I'm done with. I would call him a Christian nationalist. But the overwhelming majority of the believing community doesn't know what it means, and they don't want any part of that. And so there's a political, you can raise money. You quote some guys, you can raise money that way, and you can say that out there. Now they say that. Now let's be extremely brutally honest. That is usually targeting white churches, and that's the way that they put it. And so you add so many other things in that. Now, lest anybody think that I'm crazy, the African American church, the Black church's spirits in America, is rich. It's got some incredible stories, music, and all that it is. And the Black church is not scared to involve themselves in the process, in their fight for justice, social reform, and all that. They think it's part of who they are to go out there. But the political persuasions that came onto the white foot, we're not supposed to do that. And that's not right. We're all have a seat at the table. But we're not Christian nationalists. And I know somebody are listening and they're saying, Jim, I know about you. And they could take a sentence from a sermon that I preached 15 years ago, and you know how it is right now. And it does on the right and the left both. They could take that one sentence that I said, and it might be my weird sense of humor that I was even saying it. I don't know. But they could take that sentence and label me as a nationalist, label me as a liberal or right-wing fundamentalist wacko. They could do that. And they could do that to anybody. They could do that to you or anything else. And if it fits the agenda of the folks that are writing it, that's what will happen. But they need to hear us. It's an attack line. Churches don't want to take over the government. Good night, no. Who would? How are they going to pay their bills? The government needs to solve Social Security. I don't want to be involved in that discussion. But I don't think it's as big as the attack says it is. Now, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Let me tell you how the extreme goes and how the culture is, and why some Christians are pushing back. When 9/11 happened, tragedy, incredible thing. Now, I also did radio broadcasting for a high school football team down at Bryant. So I was there a lot and all that. So 9/11 happens. We have our first ball game. People are devastated. They're wondering what's going to happen. And we're in the stands. And some folks wanted to pray. They just wanted to start a public prayer. They're dealing with the crisis and all that we're all were dealing with at that time. They just wanted to pray, but they were told they couldn't pray publicly in a secular environment. They were not allowed to do that. That's ridiculous. Uh, that's ridiculous. And that's what some push back against because they feel the church has been pushed so far and pushed to the back corner. And so there's nothing wrong with praying in a public arena. Now, I had an experience like this at a city that's located in central Arkansas, but I'm not going to label it anymore. And I wouldn't dare say, well, no, I better not. So let me tell you what happened to me. Because of where I've been, and I was not at church ambassador at that time, I was invited to come and to pray for the city, and the ceremonial thing. I've done that many times, but they made a mistake when they talked to me that day. One of them came up to me and said, put a finger in my face and said, listen, you do a good prayer and you be careful. We don't want to offend anybody. Well, now that just really ticked me off, but I knew what they were talking about. So I prayed in Jesus' name because of what she said to me. And so they told me I'd never be back. I'd never be allowed and all that kind of stuff because I prayed in Jesus' name. That's ridiculous. But that's the kind of thing that we react to, or some of the church react to, and that, there's common ground, far more common ground than not. And we've got to find that again and not allow political parties, Republican or Democrat, push us to one extreme or another.
I appreciate what you're saying. In essence, I'm hearing it about, the freedom to practice your religion.
Sure.
And I understand that. I think one of the key things, and this is kind of part of that issue about church-state relations, is, this country was founded on freedom of religion. So it didn't matter which particular religion you belong to. You didn't bring the force of government to bear in favor of or against one side or the other. And that's my understanding as the main argument that the left would make about public prayers in secular settings, is that if there's good wide representation, it might be different. But what often happens is the majority religion, in our case, Christianity, takes over, and that works against other religions, or for that matter, people who have no religion. That would be
Sure.
one of the main arguments, right?
Right. It would be. Thomas Jefferson's letter, which is where that phrase came from, that separation of church and state. He was actually assuring a Baptist preacher up there in the Northeast, the government's not going to come and tell you what to do. That's what that pastor was looking for. He was wanting to make sure there was a separation. I don't want the government to tell me what to do, and I'll fight him to death on that. But they don't need me to create a theocracy. Who in their right mind would want that? I know preachers, man. There's not any of them that I'd want in there in that kind of capacity. So anyway, it's a fun political point to debate.
It is, and I think about the term I've heard, legislating morality.
Oh, yes.
That I think there are some who believe, because we have groups like, conservative lobbying groups that are on the Christian side of things. Family Council's example of one of them.
Sure.
That seems to be, we've got to put our view of what morality is into legislation, so that if other people don't agree with that, then they've lost. And I think that also has been connected to Christian nationalism.
Sure.
Any thoughts on that?
Oh, sure. I love the idea of legislate morality. By the way, we do that all the time. we say it's not right to steal from somebody else. That's moral. Or it's not right to kill somebody else. That's immoral. And but I know what they're meaning, and I know some of the laws that have been proposed that would embarrass all of us. Um, Once again, I love this kind of talk. Yes, you are. I think the criticism is very valid. And there are some Christian brothers and sisters that really bother me, that if they disagree with me on this issue, it might be about insurance or something like that. If you're not with me 100% of the time, you're against me all the time. That's fundamentalism with a capital F. And so if that happens to come into a moral issue and then they disagree, then they say they're lost or they're against God or they're of the devil or something like that. And it gets on the Christian circles that way. It's just wrong. It's not what Jesus taught us to do. And we can have a disagreement. We can have disagreement.
There are a lot of people around the country who feel that Christians can sometimes come across as being really more judgmental than loving, which is kind of ironic because if Jesus stood for anything, it was for loving your fellow human beings. He modeled that in his willingness to reach out and spend time with and show love to all sorts of people, including the ones who the authorities of the day often thought was unclean or undesirable and things like that. He talked about forgiveness and mercy. Given all that, how do you advise your fellow Christians about better modeling those aspects of what Jesus taught and modeled?
Well, one, if they build a relationship with them, you're not like the police officer that she was referring to a while ago. You won't see the uniform, you'll see the person. And so if they have a relationship, they're going to be able to talk and listen and understand. And boy, we churches, it's not fashionable to say that, like the Bible teaches in our mind, people are sinners. All of us have sinned. We fall short of the glory of God. And so you can go to a lot of churches that won't use that word because they don't want to offend anybody. Well, to me, it's not an offensive word. It says that I have a problem. I need a God. I need God to save me from that. And then it's done in that way. And you seek forgiveness and restitution, all those concepts. But I've been around some churches. I heard a pastor once that was preaching on hell. And the way he was preaching made me think he wanted me to go. That's where he was sending me, if I didn't do exactly all that he said. And I think the people in my church that listen to me all the time, if I said, hey, buddy, this is not a good thing to be doing, they would receive that as somebody who cares for them. And I hope that's the way Jesus was received. The people he had the greatest problem with, you know who they were. They were the religious people.
Mm-hmm. The religious leaders at the time.
He was rocking their boat.
Well, that's it for the second part of April and Glenn's conversation with Jim Lagrone. We'll continue this conversation in the next episode, so be sure to check out part 3. And remember that On the Other Hand offers dozens of other interviews like this one. You can find our On the Other Hand podcast inside your favorite podcast app or on the podcast page of the Braver Angels Arkansas website at arkansas.braverangels.org.
On the Other Hand is sponsored by Braver Angels in Arkansas. Music was composed by Randall Standridge of Jonesboro, Arkansas, and was performed by the University of Northern Colorado Symphonic Band, Dr. Richard Main, conductor.
From your host, April Chatham Carpenter
and Glenn White.
Join us in working to make our relationships and communities better.